Funny, embarrassing, horrible things you've witnessed at a bar. Story 1. At the bottom of the world, there is a city. In this city, there is an Irish pub. In this pub, I witnessed a miracle. A young, beautiful couple had been arguing back and forth in the corner for some time. And I'd overheard through my crude understanding of Spanish that she was worried she might be or was pregnant. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or anything. They were quite vocal and it was very drawn out. He wanted her to leave her parents and live with him or something like that. But her father hated him and wouldn't let her. An hour or so passed and the father came charging in with the police to arrest him. For what exactly, I wasn't sure. At that point, the angry father was screaming at the young man so violently his face went blood red and he started taking massive gasps of air, but looked as though no air could enter his lungs. He repeatedly tried drawing air in until he collapsed into a ball on the ground. The young man immediately sprung into action, pulling out a Swiss Army knife and grabbing a straw off the bar, and performed an emergency tracheotomy. The sound of that first gasp of air in a room so solemnly silent was the most incredible noise I've ever heard in my life. The entire bar erupted in cheer, and the relief as the rush of adrenaline faded left many with trembling hands. As he was taken out to the ambulance, the father, with tears in his eyes, was holding the hands of the young man and mouthing the words, "Lo siento, lo siento, lo siento," over and over again. Mouthing words, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," for the lazy like me. Wait, so this guy actually collapsed because the dad was shouting at him so much? Oh, that's really sad. Or am I missing something here? I feel like there's got to be something more to this story. Surely you wouldn't collapse if someone's shouting at you like that, would you? Or would you? Unless you're just really sensitive, because that's really sweet. Poor boy. Lo siento, lo siento, lo siento. Yes, you should be saying that, father, because you've just made the poor boy collapse. Because you're such a mean, nasty bloke. Okay. Story 2. In a bar club in not-so-rural Ireland, I see this rubbish-faced guy come upstairs looking a little shifty. He edges over to a low table where there are a load of glasses and without turning around, picks one up and holds it as if it was his. Waits a bit to see if anybody challenges him, a real pro, before chugging it back. He barely registered that he'd picked up a glass with a candle in it and poured hot wax over his face before moving on. Crazy kids. You losers keep drinking your beers. That just leaves more delicious candle wax for me. Oh, frick, that's good. It melts the stress right off your face. Ooh, hot wax. Now that seriously burns. As a kid, did anyone used to get their, like the tea light candles in their living rooms? I used to pick them up when there was loads of wax in them and pour them on my legs. It sounds like I was trying to torture myself. I really wasn't. It was actually kind of nice. I can't lie. It became addictive. I'm not some crazy girl, by the way, all right, guys? Like, I was just a kid. And you find things to play with. It was just one of those things. But like if you poured it really slowly onto your leg, it would just create such a really warm little circle on your skin. But it wasn't hot enough to burn. But yeah, it just felt really nice. I don't recommend it though, okay? Goodbye. Story 3. Working security in a bar in rural Ireland. Half an hour before closing, 2 of the local guys stumble up to the door, literally holding each other up. I had no intention of letting them in for their own benefit, but then they explained that it was a friend's stag night and they were on a mission to have 1 pint in every establishment that sold alcohol in the town. And my place was the second last on the list. Keep in mind this is rural Ireland, and we counted 18 different premises that sell alcohol. I knew the guys well, and they weren't troublemakers and were close friends of the owner, so with his approval, I let them in for a pint. Kicking out time comes and they're both slumped over half-finished pints of Guinness. Friend B gets up to stumble to the toilet, and as he leaves, Friend A pukes all over the table, and most of it ends up directly in the glass in front of him. Friend B arrives back after a minute before the staff could clean the mess up, and in his drunken state took no notice of his friend's situation. Oh no, I know what's going to happen here, guys. He told him to get a move on so they could make the last bar, and Friend A proceeds to pick up the glass of 70% puke, 30% Guinness, and downs it in one go. Obviously forgetting his recent chunder, I gagged, yet Friend A didn't even bat an eye. Drank the lot and stumbled out of the bar with his friend onto the last pub. Story 4. Well, my favourite bar in the universe is in Wisconsin. It's an old house from the early 1900s, which was a party house for many years, and got converted to a bar in the 1980s. This place could have volumes written about the owners, clientele, and stories from the bar. However, since it was converted from a house, the front room still has a giant front window, which was common in houses in this area from that period. This bar is called The Port, Across the street is another far worse bar that's a standalone brick building with an alley running alongside the bar. I think at the time it was called Harbourside Inn. A bunch of my pals are boozing and looking out the front window when we see a couple disappear into the alley. They duck behind the dumpster, and since the man is standing and making pleasurable faces and the woman has disappeared behind the trash bin, it's quite obvious to us that she's blowing him behind the dumpster. Since we're viewing this from all about 40 feet away and through the closed glass, it's like the funniest silent movie corno that we would imagine, and we all enjoyed a few good laughs over our beers and viewing entertainment. Of course, a discussion evolved on dumpster heads and the merits of a woman willing to imbibe in a mouthful of mule behind a dirty bar garbage dumpster. The next thing we know, a woman emerges from the front door. She looks left, looks right, walks back into the bar whilst the guy is still receiving the dumpster BJ. A few minutes later, the same woman comes out of the front door with phone in hand and walks toward the alley. When she sees the blower and blowee, she goes haywire. Bear in mind, we're watching all of this as a silent movie, but you can see the woman erupting with anger. The chick who was giving the dumpster BJ scuttles away, and the guy and second woman continue to argue and go nuts. The woman briefly stops arguing with the guy and goes back inside the bar. She comes out a third time with her purse in hand and confronts the dude again. This time, she whips off a ring, throws it on the ground and scurries off toward her car where she drives away. The scene closes with the dude, also known as the BJ receiver, on his hands and knees searching under a beat-up minivan for the wedding ring his wife apparently just threw on the ground. And again, all without sound, but the narrative was unbelievable. No sound required to understand the full story. Long story short, dumpster BJs, a woman scorned, a marriage destroyed, and we watched it all as a live silent movie. This isn't actually that relevant. That does sound very jokes, but imagine what it would be like to be a security guard, right? Your life would be an actual movie. Like, you would just see some crazy things, wouldn't you? I mean, things from like that, for example, dumpster BJs, arguments, fights, the lot. You would see it all, wouldn't you? I bet it's a really entertaining job, to be fair, but also very difficult because I could not cope with drunken idiots. I know what I'm like when I'm drunk, and I wouldn't want to cope with me, to be honest. Just so annoying, isn't it? Respect to all our security guards because they really do not have it easy. Although I bet it's fun tackling down a drunken idiot when they're sort of like kicking off. That must be fun. Story 5. One night it was slow. 2 guys came in. They ordered beers, and one of the guys pulled off an army boot, poured his drink into the boot, and started drinking. This was not a quick little stunt. It goes on for a while, okay? People start to notice and get increasingly weirded out. The 2 guys ask for more beer, and the bartender is really grossed out and having a hard time with it, but basically gives in and pours more. By the way, watching someone drink out of a boot is really disgusting. They weren't laughing. They were both kind of solemn, not enjoying it. No one was talking to them. It was pretty eerie. I was sitting there trying to figure out what all this was about. Why the frick was it happening? Finally, I thought I figured out what was going on. I came up to them, squared off, looked the guy that was drinking out of the boot and said, "Showing your loyalty to him because you wronged him somehow." There was a pause and the non-boot drinker said, "Yup, caught him with my girlfriend. I dumped her and don't want to lose him as a friend. A little booty can both destroy and repair a friendship." Story 6. I was on a uni trip to China and my boyfriend and I were with some friends at a bar in Beijing. It was about 4 a.m. and we decided to leave. Just as we were about to walk out, a fight broke out on the dance floor. We turned to look and the bar staff all started taking off their shirts, grabbing bottles of alcohol from behind them and started breaking bar stools. They head over to the dance floor with their crude weapons and start smashing bottles and hitting everyone with bar stools that were in sight. Worst part was, some innocent guy that was trying to walk away from the fight got a whole glass bottle broken on his head. He went down and started convulsing on the floor, blood everywhere. His friends grabbed him and dragged him outside. Everyone thought he was dead. It was awful. Chinese bars are some intense rubbish. Whoa. See, these drunken bar fights really are not worth it, okay? Because you're not going to remember it in the morning and people can get seriously hurt. Like, it could be life-changing damage. Like, they're just so not worth it. Where I'm from in my hometown, there's constantly fights. I'm like, ugh. Like, what are you getting out of this? Do you know what I mean? Like, nobody thinks you're cool because you're fighting. Like, no one. And it's all of it's just alcohol driven anyway. It's all influenced by alcohol. Like, you wouldn't be fighting if you weren't drunk. Don't get in fights when you're drunk, people. It's not big and it's not clever. Story 7. My older brother was at the Australian Defence Force Academy for a couple years. And I went out one night for drinks with him and a bunch of his buddies. It was a pretty quiet midweek night, and we were in a half-empty pub with a jukebox playing solemnly in the background. Eagle Rock by Daddy Cool came on, and without so much as a glance at each other, every single one of these army guys, about 15 or so, formed a circle, dropped their pants to their ankles, and started shuffling back and forth, all while continuing their conversations and sipping their pints. When the song finished, they hitched their pants back up and kept talking without so much as missing a beat in their conversations. I turned to my brother and said, "Dare I ask?" He said, "No, you dare not." I never got an explanation. It's become somewhat of an Australian custom to do what's referred to as the eagle drop whenever the song comes on. The lead singer of Daddy Cool went to the University of Queensland, and in tribute, the pants are dropped and one dances like an eagle. Saw him play live last year, and whilst playing, proceeded to eagle drop. Top bloke. Don't know if there's an ADFA reason for this, though. Story 8. Let's see. All of this at a place called Gandalf's. Some guy gets roofied, and another guy proceeds to make out with him. The victim's female friend is screaming and trying to break them apart. Blood all over the urinal. Some guy started shoving me, and I pushed him back. He fell on the ground, which is literally covered in broken glass and soot, cutting his wrist open and bleeding everywhere. The bouncers use the taser on people in the street outside. There's this obese goth guy with a glass eye who rides a really old motorcycle. He emits a great stench. One night the place is so packed, probably a student night, literally wall to wall with people, yet despite the dense fog of unventilated cigarette miasma, people avoid him with at least a 1 meter radius. He was like Moses parting the sea. There's probably more. Story 9. I used to work at a bar, so I have a few stories from a few different positions, but this one from when I was a bathroom attendant is my favourite. We had a dwarf in the bar that night. He got absolutely smashed. He came into the bathroom, a beer in each hand, and realised he was too short for the urinals, so he went into the stall to pee. He didn't close the stall door and started peeing. I honestly don't remember if he put down his beers to undo his fly, but he managed to get the urine into the bowl, so whatever. Once he finished, he spun around on the heels of his tiny feet and shouted, "It's party time!" and ran out of the bathroom. His elf-like doing just dangling from his pants. I do not know what happened to him after this. I bet these people, right, who work in bars have seen so much stuff. Like, just picture it now. Picture the worst thing you've done drunk, okay? Like, they see that every single day in and out. They must have really good stories to tell people. Well, it's like the security guards, isn't it? But it just must be such hard work because you've got to be up for hours, haven't you? Hours on end. Dealing with these loud, annoying humans. We are annoying drunk, aren't we, guys? We actually just all are annoying drunk. Like, I hate myself drunk every single time I wake up with beer fear, thinking, what on earth did I say to people last night? Because I cannot remember, and I know I just would have been chatting a load of poo. Story 10. Worst thing I saw. I used to work in a backpackers bar in London. These 3 Canadian guys turned their shot glasses over one night and looked at me and the manager and then said, "Give us Southern Comfort." We're like, what the heck are you going to do with it? They go, "Put it in the little dip. We're going to snort it." Manager says, "Hey." So we fill up the little dip with Southern Comfort, which they promptly snort. "Oh God, that burns, holy frickin' heck. Again. So we give them some more. "Holy crap, that burns, frick. Again. They were like freaking Teletubbies that swear and snort liquor. I ended up losing track of them after a few times because I was mostly working the floor that night. But when it came time to kick everyone out, I came across a passed out guy on the floor underneath a table. One of the girls in the group dragged him off when I found her. Long story short, had 3 Canadians snorting Southern Comfort in my bar. I'll have to try that with Coke. Story 11. On a weekend trip to Nashville, my buddies and I ventured into Tootsie's bar and got pretty lit while there. We decided after an hour or so to make our way to another establishment and made our way to the door. The setup there is so that the live band playing is situated directly next to the entrance and exit. So we walked right past the band to leave. The lead singer, for some reason, decided to call out my buddy behind me, saying something like, "Getting too late for ya?" My buddy, who happens to be a fairly large fellow at about 315 pounds, 6'3", turned to him and slowly lifted a corner of his shirt to expose a big ol' nip. The band's frontman laughed and called him out again. "You won't do that on stage!" Wrong thing to say. My buddy jumped up on stage and completely tore off his pearl snap shirt and danced to the entirety of Hank Williams Jr.'s All My Rowdy Friends. For a big guy, my buddy has some moves. They finished up the song, he jumped off the stage, flipped off the lead singer, and we walked out the door to raucous applause and cheering. Drinking whiskey and beer and getting rowdy. You think that's bad? I went to Zante once with a bunch of my girlfriends and we were at the strip. obviously getting lit. And in Zante, basically the bartenders just like pour shots in your mouth from the bottle. And I was very drunk, stood up on the bar, bearing in mind it was quite dead. No one was really like on that vibe. Obviously I was. I got onto the bar, started twerking, right? This is just me on my own. Everyone's sort of looking up at the bar thinking, oh no, I feel embarrassed for her. Like they're getting secondhand embarrassment. Do you know what I mean? That's how dead it is. And I'm there like, yeah, like proper dancing, going for it, sweating, like looking disgusting as well. Oh, the state of it. The actual state of it. Like I thought I looked proper good as well. You know, one of them ones when you think you look really nice and like attractive. Yeah, I didn't. I looked awful and I can't work. So it's making me feel sick. Story 12. About a year ago, I was outside this bar frequented by DePaul students while I was getting food. This bar's known as a real rubbish show, college kids being just absolutely trashed as heck. But there was this one girl who really hit it out the park. She staggers outside of the bar in your standard skank armour, miniskirt and low-cut top. She sways for a few seconds, then grabs onto a small tree and unleashes a projectile spew at least 3 feet out into the street. As this is happening, I notice a puddle forming between her feet. Something's glistening on the side of her leg. The lady was firing from both ends. Now, at this point, I imagine alcohol had shut down all, but the most basic reptile parts of the limbic system. That deep, evolutionary, ancient part of the brain that only computes danger, horniness, and rage. She looked at her work for a few seconds, slack-jawed with a pronounced forward lean, arms hanging at her sides like one of Romero's zombies. She then reached up, grabbed 2 handfuls of leaves, and threw them on the puddle of urine. She did this for about 5 or 10 minutes, no doubt attempting to obscure her scent from saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths that her hindbrain told her must always be a threat. Upon finishing her task, she staggered back into the bar, and they let her in. Story 13. Slow night at the pub, and 3 of my friends and myself were watching a baseball game, hanging out with the bartender who we're friends with. Guy nobody knows walks in, looks completely hammered. He takes 2 steps, stops, and leans on the door with a weird look of extreme concentration on his face. After a few seconds of what looks to be an incredible amount of mental anguish, he quickly walks past us without a word and goes to the bathroom. Seconds after he passes us, my friend looks at me and goes, "Bro, that's nasty. Did you just fart?" "Nah, man, I thought that was you." The 4 of us and the bartender all look at each other. Nobody farted. Dude, that guy may or may not have just cracked himself 20 feet from the bathroom. Bartender sends the kid who was training to check in the bathroom, and we all follow. Kid walked in and the guy was standing in front of the sink, naked from the waist down, wiping his bum with his pants. "What the frick are you doing?" I think I pooped myself." Bartender immediately goes to throw the guy out, and he locks his poo-stained self in the stool. After 5 minutes of yelling at the guy, threatening to call the cops, he fills an ice bucket with water and dumps it on the guy, which finally gets him out of the stall. Unfortunately, it also floods the bathroom floor with rubbish. So now, in addition to rubbish on the sink, rubbish on the toilet seat, and rubbish on the walls of the stall, there's motherfrickin' rubbish soup covering the floor. Poo-Poo Pants himself flips out, starts hurling profanity and shaking his poo-covered pants at the lot of us, and we all run to the far side of the bar, lest he touch any of us. He stumbles out the bar, still naked from the waist down, holding his poo-stained pants and underwear, and leaves. We watched him walk across the parking lot to Wendy's and a bank, both of which were closed. Both of which he tries to ram the door open with his shoulder. At this point, we go back inside and the bartender presents us with a challenge. Anyone who can stand inside the bathroom for 30 seconds gets a shot of Jameson. You cannot imagine the horror that was the men's room. First time I ever turned down a free drink. Long story short, I think I pooped myself. Long story short, guy shoots himself. Bartender makes entire situation worse. Oh, the poor bloke. I mean, I think if you knew that he pooed himself, you should have just left him in there to sort himself out. Like, okay, he was wiping his bum with his trousers, but I mean, it could have worked. You don't know. You should have just gave him his privacy. He could have sorted himself out and you guys should have just carried on getting drunk. Because I bet that was so embarrassing for him. Do you know what I mean? Bless him. Like, obviously, he's pooed himself. You don't want anyone to know. Then you lot rushing in, like, saying, "What the hell are you doing?" It's not a good day for him, is it? It's not a good day at all. And you lot didn't help, all right? I'm going to be honest. You didn't. Story 14. Someone decided to punch me on the head for no reason at all. He broke his hand doing so. Sweet justice. Mine was similar, but I ended up with a broken nose. My crime was talking to the ex-girlfriend of the guy who hit me. Story 15. Bartending in 1999, downtown San Diego. There's a big convention center downtown, and my bar was about a 15-minute walk from it. There was a Harley-Davidson convention going on that night, and it had been completely dead all night. I sent the cocktail waitress home about 20 minutes prior when two really burly bikers stumble in. I'm a pretty dang burly guy myself, but these guys had an edge to them that made my neck hair raise up. One guy walks straight to me at the bar. The other one heads to the back towards our bathrooms. The guy orders 2 beers, and I crack them and set them down. He proceeds to chug one, then the other, and orders 2 more. By now, the other guy's come back from the bathrooms as I'm setting the next 2 beers down. He grabs one with one hand, and in the other, I notice he's clutching a $5 bill very tightly. There was something wrong about it, and I started to stare to figure out what it was. The bill was smeared with blood. Blood was also, I now noticed, dripping steadily from the bottom of his hand where he was clutching the money, apparently using it to try and soak up some of the blood. He sees me staring and with the creepiest voice says, "You should see the other guy," and smiles all weird. His friend slaps him on the arm and tells him to shut up. I quickly divert my attention elsewhere and start cleaning some bottles. About 5 minutes after this, I hear a lot of rumbling and about 20 freaking choppers come rolling up. I'm like, what the... I was seriously thinking how I was going to handle having 20 hardcore bikers in my bar with just me. Wasn't feeling so burly anymore. Thankfully though, when the bikers pull up, the ones in my bar get up to leave. The non-wounded one comes over to pay the tab. Then he takes a $20 and pushes it over the bar. "It goes without saying, we weren't ever here." I nod mutely and take the money. When they leave, I start closing. When I went to check the bathrooms before locking the doors, always just to make sure no one was passed out in there, the rubbish was crazy. The biker who was hurt must have had it nasty. There was blood everywhere. The trash was full of blood-soaked paper towels and the sink was covered in bloody water. Made the gorge rise in my throat, there was so much of it. I always think that night could have ended much worse for me than getting a late-night $20 tip. Long story short, 2 bikers show up at my bar after fighting or murdering someone and make my bathroom look like a slaughterhouse, but they tipped me well. Wow, it would be so terrifying, like looking after an entire bar by yourself late at night. That's why I could never do that job. Because how do you know what you're going to be faced with? Like, you just don't know. You don't know what happens to people when they're drunk. Some people can really turn and be really vicious. It would be terrifying. Guys, what are your worst drunken experiences, like that you've experienced of people being drunk, like behavior-wise? What are the worst things you've experienced? Because I wouldn't say these are too bad, would you? I don't think they've been that strange. Story 16. Gay Pride Brooklyn. Dive bar with the stripper pole built into the bar. A 50 to 60-year-old woman climbs up on the pole and starts dancing. Cool. More power to her. Until she takes her top off. All right. Then her pants. Then her underwear. And she grinds on that pole like she has something against it. Like straight up slit on metal grinding. Then she gets in mine and my roommates' faces with her butt in my face to get dollars while I try to puke in my beer. The bartender danced next. I made her wash her hands before pouring me another drink. Story 17. I am working as a bouncer. I walked into the men's bathroom. I noticed one guy with his pants off sitting in the sink. I noticed the walls, typically white, were now brown. Chunky and vomit-streaked to boot. I walked out, told the manager I was sick, and went home. Would love to know what goes through these people's heads, wouldn't you? Like, what makes people want to, poo on the wall? Because some people actually do wipe poo on the wall, like it's a thing. Like, what goes through their heads? Why did they think, they looked at their poo and thought, I want to wipe this on the wall. Like, what makes you do that? Do you know what I mean? Story 18. The best thing I've seen was actually the best thing I've done. I was at a sweet summer bar, 4 floors, the top being an amazing patio looking over the Otonabee River, Peterborough, Ontario. I drank with my college friends there many times. This time was particularly wild night, my 21st birthday. Some friends waitressed, overserved us there, and most of the staff knew us pretty well. I'm on the patio, having lost all my friends and getting stumbles. I can't seem to keep my feet under me, but my brain and speech seems to be okay. Knowing I'm without a doubt going to break my neck and die on the several flights of stairs down, or worse, live with the embarrassment, I wobbled over to a bouncer I was somewhat familiar with and leveled with him. I swore I wouldn't make it. I gave him $10 and asked him to kick me out, by which I mean walk me down the stairs. On the 2nd or 3rd flight, I leaned back and told him to sell it, so he gently wobbled me back and forth and clenched the collar of my shirt, all the while painstakingly making sure I was not going to fall. I threw my arms up in the air and made party noises as the crowd cheered for me, for being the fun-wasted guy, not the obnoxious or violent kind. I got to the entrance at ground level and found all of my friends there trying to sort out where I was. The bouncer straightened my collar, brushed my shoulder off while I got an ovation from all my friends. On my next visit, the bouncer gave me $10 back. Don't really believe you. Story 19. Heavy girl walks into a bar drunk. Bartender says, "You're too drunk. Get out." Girl lifts up shirt to reveal sad little fried egg boobies. Bartender points at door and says, "Listen, Janie, I've told you before and I will tell you again. You are not welcome here. That is disgusting. Nobody wants to see your boobs, but especially not your brother. Get out." Story 20. I watched my friend pee into an empty beer pitcher under the counter of the bar. It was crowded enough that no one noticed him doing it. He then pulled up the beer pitcher, poured some into an empty glass and challenged a girl to a beer chugging competition. She accepted, chugged half of it, then declared, "This beer's warm and watered down." I was in utter shock and disbelief. He later took the girl home and rode backdoor in the shower with her. Double violation. High five. Oh, that is rough. That is so rough. Like, he's taken full advantage of us ladies there being drunk. He knows someone's going to accept the challenge and drink his pee. Not about that, you loser. And then you got to take her home as well. You absolutely pulled. You did. I wonder if he ever told her that she drank his pee. If you're listening, do let us know. Story 21. Lol, the vomit one is funny. Sick, but funny. I think the most embarrassing one that I've seen was a toss-up between the guy who stumbled out of the bar one night, and it was only like 10 p.m. too, to vomit his $30 worth of drinks onto a police car parked outside. Or one time my girlfriends and I were at a club, and some douche was hitting on us. He offered to get us some drinks, but then asked me if I wanted to dance first. In the middle of dancing, he started to get hard, then whispers in my ear that his dong's hard and that he wanted to show it to me. I walked away grossed out. My friend took the opportunity for some trolling and started dancing with him. He did the same thing to her, but she said, "Come on then, let's see it." Douche whips it out on the dance floor. She responds with, "That's it," starts laughing and walks away. All the while, the drunk douche is standing on the dance floor with his dong hanging out, fuming mad, calling my friend a fricking "see you next Tuesday" and some other fierce words. The correct troll response to "my dong is hard" would have been "so is mine." Story 22. My worst one has to be cleaning out the girls' toilets in a club one night. I opened the stall to find the back wall and toilet pebble dashed at chest height in poo and a pooey thong lying on the floor. My guess as to what happened is that some unlucky girl was caught short, ran to the toilets and unloaded her guts full force before managing to remove the necessary clothing, resulting in a poo fountain covering everything possible behind her. A sight I will not soon forget. Yeah, boys, let me get one thing straight here, okay? If you lot think you're going into a woman's bathroom, right, and it's going to be pristine with unicorns and pretty pictures and hairbrushes and perfumes, you're wrong. It's probably worse than your toilets. I'm not joking. Girls are disgusting on a night out. Some of the states the toilets have been in, honestly, you would not believe it. Story 23. I work at a bar, and a few years ago, a girl was dancing in the bar, like girls tend to do. Well, this time the bar was slippery. She slipped, falling towards us bartenders behind the bar, and hit her knees on the corner that separates the part of the bar reserved for rubber mats, half-inch lower. That's not the worst part. First, those rubber mats were stolen just recently, so she nails her knees directly onto the corner and then straight into the wood. Continues to fall forward, then gets her eye impaled by a pourer from the house liquor located inconveniently below her. She's so drunk she doesn't even fully realise what happened. She then tries to pull it out as we all stand there mortified. Needless to say, you can't dance in the bar anymore. Long story short, girl falls off the bar, impales her eye. Story 24. Might be quite tame, but I saw a guy throw up liquid all over the floor of a bar. Somehow none of the bouncers or bar staff notice, and the pukey liquid is just left there. A few seconds later, some girl comes back from the loos and slips up in the liquid. She's drunk and her mate struggles to pull her up, but she slips over as well. Hilarious and disgusting at the same time. Oh, that's no surprise. Honestly, I bet the cleanliness of a bar is disgusting. The amount of times I've seen my boyfriends, as in like they're my friends but boys, drink shots and then just be sick on the floor in the pub or the bar, like wherever we are. And it's just left there, like just soaks into the carpet. Like, it's disgusting. Story 25. An American college kid got kicked out of the Oktoberfest tent in Munich at 9:15 a.m. The tent opens at 9 a.m, so he managed 15 minutes flat before being banned, right? This one kid in particular must have been roughly 19 or 20 years old and bought a Mass or Stein, whatever you want to call it. It's a litre of beer in a big butt mug. Anyhow, he jumps up on the table and announces to his 12 or so buddies that he's going to scold the lot. It's obvious to all that this kid has absolutely no chance. But A+ for effort. So he's on the table and trying to down this enormous beer. All the while his table's yelling, "Skull, skull, skull," at him. He gets about 20% of the way through and bugs out. All his buddies start booing him. He's fuming, so he kind of flings his beer, not letting go of the mug, but kind of flinging the beer in annoyance of his poor effort. Unfortunately, the contents of the mug land on one of those nutcase German security guards who promptly frog marches him out the door. Hope the trip was worth it, mate. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 26. I was a barmaid at a neighbourhood dive bar in Cleveland. There were rarely more than 10 people in the place at any one time. The jukebox was loaded with terrible classic rock. The bar didn't serve food apart from bags of chips and the occasional beef jerky, and the clientele were mostly old reprobates who lived within walking distance. One of the female regulars, a woman in her late 30s, was frequently the drunkest person in the bar. On one very special evening, she stumbled toward the back area where the ladies' room and the kitchen were located. Shortly thereafter, I needed something from the kitchen and went in. The woman apparently mistook the kitchen for the ladies' loo, as she'd opened the oven door and was defecating into it. A few weeks later, two of the old drunks got into an argument over who was president before Calvin Coolidge. This was in 1988, before the internet, so the question wasn't as easy to resolve as it would be today. One guy got so frustrated that he went into the parking lot and returned with a cinder block, which he used to bash in the other guy's skull. The amount of blood that poured and squirted from that guy's head was unbelievable. Paramedics said that his blood was ultra thin due to long-term alcoholism. The dude bled out before EMS could save him. I'd say that's got to be the most nuts one yet, hasn't it? That is insane. What did he smash his head with again? I can't remember. A cinder block. What's a cinder block? Whatever it is, it sounds like it's going to hurt, okay? But that's definitely got to be the most just nuts one. Like, this guy genuinely just murdered some guy over some question. Like, what? Story 27. Funniest thing I've seen in a bar is the girl drunk enough to leave with me. It was funny because all our friends were laughing. Story 28. I once stayed at a hostel in London on the way to Morocco. After meeting a friend for drinks, I went back to the hostel. The pub bit was shut, but all the Aussie staff were having a mental time in there. So I knocked on the door and asked if I could join them. So we had a mad evening with drinks and people snorting stuff. The end of the night comes and I head off to bed. Bear in mind it's a hostel, and there were about 10 bunks in the room, most of them full of weary travellers. 10 minutes after going to bed, two of the staff roll in, jump on one of the bunks and start to frick. About 3 foot away from me. After about 2 or 3 minutes, the guy jumps up shouting and turns the light on. "Crikey, Sheila, that's disgusting. I can't carry on with that smell." Turns out she'd just taken her shoes off and had the worst smelling feet in the world. He then gets her shoes in a plastic bag and hangs them outside the window. The next bit is priceless. He sits down on the bed, grabs his phone and phones his mate who's downstairs, just to tell him he had to stop doing it with this bird because her feet were so bad. To which she facepalmed and moaned, "I knew we should have gone to mine." Turns out she had a flat just down the road. I love that the Aussie staff literally said "Crikey" and "Sheila" in the same sentence. Achievement unlocked. Stereotypes. Oh, I don't know whether to feel bad for the bloke or the woman, because stinky feet are the worst thing in the world. I cannot lie. I wouldn't be able to deal with it at all. But then it must be really embarrassing for her as well. So it's like, whose side are you on here? But it is actually quite funny that he called his mate just to tell him that he had to stop doing it with her because she had smelly feet. Classic bloke move, I reckon. Who agrees? Story 29. I doubt anyone will believe this, and I still can't believe I saw it myself. Went to a club in Manchester, UK called Factory, and on the middle floor there's a dance floor. My friends and I were all dancing. Next thing we know, there's a guy and some smash girl in the corner fricking while standing up about 3 meters from where we were on a packed out dance floor. We just laughed and carried on. After a minute or so, he came to his senses and she just looked in a state. Really drunk and her hair was everywhere and she just stumbled off. Was by a long shot the weirdest thing I've seen. See, this is one thing I'll never understand. I don't understand how people can ever be in a position like, you can't ever be that drunk to not know you're doing that. Do you know what I mean? You have to know that you're literally doing it in front of people in a club. I could never. Like, you have to be brave, surely. Or it's just really desperate. But you cannot be that drunk to not know you're doing that. Like, do you know what I mean? Or, I mean, they know they're doing it and they just don't care. Well, in that case, more life to them, but ain't for me. Story 30. Not as bad as most, but here it goes. I was at this bar with a patio in the back, raised 1 flight off the ground with an alleyway next to it. A girl I knew had to pee real bad, and the bar was jammed, so she lifted herself up on the patio railing, leaned her butt over the railing, and shot out a golden stream. She was wearing a skirt. As for underwear, I don't know. What she didn't see was the dude who passed out in the alleyway that was peed all over. Story 31. I work at a notorious late-night dive in New Orleans, home of the $1.50 Schlitz, and we get rubbish on the time. All the time. People come here drunk at 3 a.m. and proceed to get even drunker until the sun comes up. Most of it's random fights between hormone-enraged college guys that always end up bloody, or people on the couch nearly fricking. People fricking outside are always one of my favourites, since it's kinda a dumpy neighbourhood and the neighbours do tend to stay up late. Also, it's the vast number of people who seem to be talented enough to miss the curb and sprain their ankles. There is a legend that if you get naked at the bar, you will get free drinks. So more often than I care to recount, drunk men will strip in an attempt to get their female companions to strip. Rarely do they succeed. But it's always fun to have to tell a bunch of grown men to put their clothes back on. We instituted a casual rule, based on the bartender's taste, that if it's on Jersey Shore, it ain't coming through the door. That has led to many fights for whoever's working the door, but they're always those fun fights that you just love to have and win. What else? We have our random see you next Tuesday heads. We had to 86 one guy permanently because he was giving massages. Weird, creepy massages. He lives across the street from me, which makes sitting out on my porch impossible sometimes, as he'll come over and ask for beers. Since I'm a bartender, I must always have beers on my hand, right? And the vomit. Oh, the vomit. I was behind the bar once and some dude opened his mouth to seemingly make a drink order when, lo and behold, a stream of hot liquid vomit shot out of his mouth onto me. That was the night I closed the bar earlier than anyone else ever had. We store our beer in sink-like tubes filled with ice behind the bar, so our stash of the cheap beers was contaminated by his vomit. I opened the door once while coming onto my midnight shift, only to be greeted by vomit. Some guy was in the process of running outside to vomit, and I just happened to be in the line of fire. The worst is when you see someone you've been serving all night get out to their car, vomit pure liquid for 2 minutes, then turn on the car and drive away. This is after them telling you they won't drive. I'm sure there are liability issues for me as a bartender, but some people are just self-destructive and will do it no matter what you tell them. Despite all of this, I love my job more than anything. Long story short, I work at an all-night bar and rubbish happens constantly, but I'm usually too drunk myself to recall all the details. Story 32. I was working as a barback in a classy cocktail bar on the London Bridge, when, one quiet night, the manager came in pleased as punch, saying that he'd booked out the bar for an after-hours party and that he wanted us to stay and provide drinks until it finished. We pressed him when he started getting cagey about the details of the party, how many people, what it was for, etc. And eventually, he admitted that he'd rented out the bar to a group of middle-aged swingers. 2 of the staff walked out straight away, while the rest of us demanded time and a half and that we could leave if it got too weird. He accepted and we carried on with the night. I gave up after I saw a naked 50-plus woman being double-teamed by a 350-pound guy and one of our bouncers, grabbed my money, a bottle of scotch, and tried to forget everything I'd seen on the 4 a.m. bus ride home. Never sat on any of the couches in that place ever again. Oh, London Bridge is near me. Where was this bar, hey? I want to know. Wink, wink. No, I'm joking. I do not want to know. That sounds absolutely disgusting. I bet you so many things like this happen in every single pub and club that we've ever been to, and we just don't know about it. Like, you never actually know what's happened on that chair you're sitting on. Do you know what I mean? Story 33. I was a bartender in my early 20s, and I've seen some interesting things, but my absolute favourite was this one. One night, a fight broke out between 2 guys, and sadly, fighting was quite common at this place. I sighed and picked up the phone to call the cops while the other bartender went to break it up. As I'm on the phone, I'm watching the fight, and one guy's pants flew below his bum in the scuffle to reveal fishnet stockings instead of underwear. I swear it was as if time stood still. The silence was broken by one of his friends asking, "Dude, are you wearing pantyhose?" What happened next blew my mind. Fishnet guy pulled up his pants and charges his own friend, the one who asked if he was wearing pantyhose, hitting and screaming the word witch. His friend knocked him out in one punch, then sat down and finished his beer. Story 34. I was at a party once where this very attractive girl puked all over a lounge chair and then stumbled away. 2 minutes later, this drunk guy comes stumbling over, and before anyone can stop him, he lies down in the lounge chair. Story 35. I was once a bouncer at a bar in Philadelphia called The Plough and the Stars, named after an Irish play. One night, a man in his 30s came in with 2 women of about the same age. They were both blonde and very attractive. One was his girlfriend and the other one was her friend. For the purposes of this story, we'll call them Paul, Irene, and Anne. Irene, Paul's girlfriend, was what people in the hospitality industry refer to as an inconsiderate witch. From the first moment she walked in, all anyone on the staff wanted to do was punch her in the stupid frickin' face. The night continues and Anne is really putting back the drinks. By midnight, she's blackout drunk, and Paul and I carry her outside while Irene is endlessly witching for no reason. Paul is actually a really nice guy, and you can tell he's embarrassed by the behaviour of his companions. Anne lets out a moan, tilts her head forward and vomits the liquid equivalent of the Camden Aquarium all over the sidewalk near the door. Paul is very upset, but I tell him to relax, and I go inside to get some hot water to wash it off into the street. While I'm inside, a fight breaks out in front of a club called Mint, directly across the street. What starts as a scuffle turns into a brawl, and by the time I go outside, there are about 30 cops, indiscriminately hitting everyone with billy clubs. Philadelphia PD has it tough. That is not meant to insult them. Irene actually has the gall to direct her witch stream at a cop, while Paul is trying to carry Anne away from this scene. She's completely dead weight and stretched across his shoulders. Irene starts to get in the cop's face and goes as far as to physically push him. In one of the most righteous moments of my life, the cop takes the billy club, holds it like a hockey stick and cross-checks her a good 10 feet into a row of tables and chairs. She's pretty much down for the count. Then I hear Paul yell, "What the frick?" And he starts to rush the police officer while still holding Anne on his back. I see the cop winding up to crack Paul in the head, and I can't let him go out like that. I step in between and get a billy club right across my clavicle. I spent the next 30 minutes trying not to cry. While I was being yelled at, Paul slipped away with Anne and Irene. Here's to you, Paul. I hoped you dropped both those dumb smuts in the river. Long story short, I worked at a bar, guy came with friend and girlfriend. Girlfriend got into an altercation with the police. Guy was about to get destroyed by a cop, so I intervened to try and save him. Wow, that seems hectic. Jeez. Very, very selfless move, though, getting in front of the policeman who's about to clock this guy straight in the dome. That is very selfless of you. Why did you do that, by any chance? Because Paul's a nice guy, right? But, I mean, come on. That would have been funny to watch, okay? Getting clocked round the head with a bird on his shoulder. He's on an absolute mission, isn't he? Go on, Paul. Go on, Paul. Story 36. I used to work in a pub in Bristol, UK. One night, a bunch of tinkers come in. Think of Brad Pitt's clan in Snatch. We kicked them out at the end of the night, but watched them from the window as they were arguing loudly amongst each other. Suddenly, two of the huge women start punching the rubbish out of each other. The men try to break it up, but eventually join in, and there are now 7 or 8 massive drunk tinkers brawling on the street. At some point, one of the men picks up a huge breeze block and just launches it into the window of a nice car that's parked next to them. They all turn their rage on the car and just destroy it. They were back in the morning. It was their own car. As a bartender and heavy drinker, this is the funniest story I've read here so far. Everything else is pretty standard bar nonsense, but I find this quite humorous. Do you know why it's so humorous? It's because that would only happen in Bristol. Like, I absolutely love Bristol. I lived there for 3 years. It's such a unique city, but that is just no surprise at all. Like, that sort of behaviour would just happen in Bristol. It's the best place ever. Story 37. I was with an acquaintance at a bar that was going out of business the following day, so the owner was giving away as much liquor and beer as he could. People were really taking advantage of this and getting plastered. My friend ended up getting really drunk and started harassing the owner of the bar about buying a bottle of high-end tequila for $3. The bar owner refused my friend's increasingly aggressive and somewhat insulting bids for said bottle and offered him a shot for the road if he'd just get out. Friend agrees and is presented with a flaming shot of something in a disposable plastic shot glass. It quickly becomes apparent that my friend has never had a flaming shot as he stares at the cup as if he were mesmerised. Meanwhile, the plastic begins to melt and threatens to spill the contents onto the bar. Others see this and begin chanting, "Drink! Drink! Drink!" So my friend picks up the cup, puts it to his lips and surprisingly doesn't like the feeling of the flames on his lips. Just as I'm getting the words, "Blow it out" of my mouth, he tips his head back and attempts to pour the still flaming alcohol directly into his mouth. He misses and pours the flaming liquid all over his face, which then causes his head and face to catch on fire. This wouldn't have been too difficult to handle if a self-proclaimed EMT, who happened to be holding a large cup filled with vodka, tripped over my friend's body as he fell to the floor in an attempt to put out his flaming hair and face. The vodka spilled out of the cup and onto my friend's flames. I ended up covering his head with my jacket to put the flames out. He runs out of the bar to my car. I apologise to the bar owner, pay a few bucks for the beer I had, and drive my friend to the hospital. While there, his nose skin begins dripping off of his nose, and some juggalos and their girlfriends start laughing at him. I join in the laughter. My friend is now called Ghost Rider. Long story short, see guy light head on fire. Fire fueled by more alcohol. Hospital hilarity ensues. Story 38. I saw my buddy singing karaoke, too drunk to notice that his dong was hanging out of his pants in front of the whole bar. Nobody corrected him. He finished the song and sat down. I didn't tell him until the next day. Good times. Story 39. Once when I was living in the French Quarter in New Orleans, it was Mardi Gras, and I was hanging out in a bar a few blocks off of Bourbon with a friend and his buddies from out of town. I noticed this guy stumble into the bar with two women that looked like witches. They were all over him, and they push him towards the ATM. A common scam is that witches will find a drunk guy and make some excuse to get them to go to an ATM to watch them put in their PIN. They take that guy somewhere, he passes out, then they empty his account as much as they can. He steps up to the ATM in the bar, and I pretend I'm his best friend. Hey, where did you come from? How's it going? And I tell the ladies I have to borrow him for a minute. Once I grab him away, I ask him if he knows what's going on and if he wants to be here. He tells me he doesn't know how he ended up with these girls. He was pretty blitzed, but coherent. So I asked him where his hotel is, tell him it's out the door, so many blocks over and up, and to run out the door when I tell him to. So many minutes later, when the witches realise he's not with me anymore, they're like, "Where did your friend go?" And I tell them I don't know, he probably left. Then they start threatening me. I'm going to go get my pimp and you're going to get fricked up. Blah, blah, blah. And I go, "Witch, please, this is my neighbourhood. I know half the people in this bar who are watching you threaten me right now. It's Mardi Gras. There are cops on every corner. Get the frick out." Needless to say, they left pretty quickly. Long story short, earned some in real life karma by saving a guy during Mardi Gras from getting scammed by two witches. Got threatened by those witches, then laughed in their face like a boss. Good on you for being decent to a stranger. Story 40. I was once waiting outside of a bar with two friends and we were all pretty wasted. We then saw a girl who definitely surpassed us in alcohol consumption, or she just has an extremely low tolerance. She was all over the place, and she couldn't even form comprehensible sentences and words. We couldn't help but lol as she tried to break up a fight between two equally dummied guys. It was like a mime trying to break up two drunken children. Her friend was mad and tried to sympathise with us to no avail. She then spotted a cab on the road and walked towards it, tripping on the curb, falling face first into a moat of half-ice, half-freezing water on the side of the road. This is at 2 a.m. in -25, northern Canadian weather. She then painstakingly crawled through this 2-inch deep freezing liquid to the cab, and as she finally got to it, she reached helplessly for the door handle just as the cab pulled away. In hindsight, I feel kind of like a dong, but it has to be one of the funniest things I've witnessed. Story 41. At one of my favourite bars, there's the main bar, but there's also one in the back corner for basic drinks and bottles. There's a small sink that's actually outside the bar parameter for dumping dregs and ice. Looked over one night to see a guy pooing in like a urinal. I tell my friends and we have a laugh. The guy finishes up and another guy steps up behind him and proceeds to do the same thing. There's a line of drunk guys to poo in this sink in the open bar. Story 42. On a bar patio at around 11 p.m. or so, I was having some drinks with friends and then began to have an intense political discussion with one of my prof's old teaching assistants, who was also there when out of the blue, mid-conversation, he just projectile vomits to the left. It lasted about 10 seconds and created a steaming pile of vomit beside us. He then proceeded to continue where we left off in the conversation like nothing happened, as if he didn't just cover half the patio with his upshuck. Story 43. Guy sitting at the bar a couple of stalls down from me, drinks the last of his pint, burps into his hand, then tilts his bar stool onto its back legs. He baths between his legs onto the floor, tilts back into his regular upright position and carries on. Best part? Bartender watches this. No reaction, then comes over and hands him another pint. Story 44. I worked in a burlesque club that quickly descended into chaos and disgusting men. Worst I saw was a man was standing outside the bathroom, spinning in a circle, peeing. The always popular 360p. Story 45. After a bar fight, saw an EMT cut a man's pants off. In addition to him not wearing any underwear, he had a cucumber taped to his inner thigh. Oh, I need to know the backstory behind the cucumber. Like, why is it there? Is he going to take it to another bird's house after the night out? Like, why is it there? I need to know. If you're watching, please tell us. Guys, what do you think that cucumber's there for? Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to read these. Story 46. I was drinking whiskey and coke in a short glass with a tall straw. Someone made a joke. My hand jerked up and my head went down, thus shoving the straw up my nose. My nose started bleeding, and having been drinking, it was quite the mess. Cue the following, all simultaneously. Friend 1 throws up at the sight of blood. Friends 2 and 3 assume I've been hit, immediately go looking for whoever hit me. Friend 4 laughs maniacally at the scene. 2 more strangers throw up at the sight of blood. I somehow made it to the restroom and cleaned up the blood without the bouncer seeing any of what happened. How we didn't get kicked out that night is beyond me. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.